This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Eddie Kalegi. We hope everyone's been doing well. Crazy to think it'll be 2 months this coming week since the last time we were in school. Of course, the news that we will not be going back until September. Just very surprising, but we hope everybody is doing well. Today's show is back to the old way. We've done the last few over Zoom live on Twitter. Today's is just strictly audio, and it's back uploaded to YouTube. As today's guest, we will be joined by Bruce Beck, the NBC sports reporter, to talk about how the coronavirus pandemic has affected the sports world. But before that, here are the announcements from Sarah Terracina.
Thank you, Eddie. First, as you probably already know, we will be continuing with distance learning for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. All spring activities, including sports, have been canceled. AP testing begins this week and continues through Friday, May 22nd. All tests are being conducted online. If you are taking one, be sure to be ready on your testing device 30 minutes before the designated start time. The Metuchen High School Media Club is hosting a short film competition open to all MHS students this month. If you would like to participate, contact Ben Solowski or email the club at mhsmediaclub@gmail.com. Lastly, Metuchen High School has announced that this year's Summer Institute programs, including AP Edge and college essay classes, will be conducted virtually this year. Registration for all programs is open from now through June 5th. That's all for announcements. Back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Sarah, and let's move on to our interview with Bruce Beck. The coronavirus pandemic has brought America to a standstill. Even sports have been halted. Something that we often see as an escape from our country's and our world's realities has been brought to a halt as well. To discuss this unprecedented period in the sports community and his coverage of these times, it's a pleasure to be joined by NBC sports anchor Bruce Beck. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Eddie. How are you?
I am doing great. So, before we get into the sports world, I must ask, how are you and your family doing amidst the pandemic?
Hey, we're doing fine. I worry about my mom. She's 91, but she's in Florida, and she's under lock and key, and she's been doing very well. And I worry about my 3 grandkids and one on the way, and I worry about my wife and my 2 sons, my 2 daughters-in-law. So there's a lot to worry about, but in general, we're all doing fine. And I'm doing my broadcast from my home basement, the Beck bunker, as my wife says. So we're proceeding during these, as you say, unprecedented times.
Yeah, definitely a lot to worry about, but it seems like you're doing well, so it's great to hear. So,
thank you.
Moving on to the sports world, obviously we got to first look back at March 11th. That's really the day this all started, the Utah Jazz-Oklahoma City Thunder game that was brought to a halt just before when they found out that Rudy Gobert had tested positive for coronavirus, and the NBA soon after suspended its season. And then those 48 hours right after where it seemed like league after league was suspending their season for a period of time. So maybe just talk about what that chain of events was like from your perspective.
It was really surreal. I went to the Big East tournament on Wednesday to cover the award ceremony, and it was going to be a nice opportunity to get an interview with Miles Powell and Kevin Willard. Mm-hmm. Powell was going to be named the player of the year in the conference in the Big East, and during the ceremonies that they were doing at the Garden, we get a call basically that the NCAA announced no fans for March Madness. And that was like the start. So I race out of the award ceremony, run to the court of the Garden to go live at 5 o'clock and do a report because that was big news. And we somehow got it together, ran out of this major press conference. Everybody was looking at like where I was going because the word hadn't completely spread yet in this big room of 100 people or 120 people with the award ceremony going on for the league. I did my 5 o'clock show for the Court of the Garden, raced back up into this special room at MSG where they had completed the press conferences, but I got an interview with Powell and with Willard and with Jay Wright of Villanova, and my questions were basically more about what are your thoughts on playing the NCAA tournament without fans?
Mm-hmm.
And from that whole thing, I was then live at 6 o'clock from the Garden doing the report, and then the NBA that evening canceled or postponed their season indefinitely. And I think we have Rudy Gobert and Adam Silver in many ways to thank for a lot of things in the world, because had they not reacted the way they did, and I know Gobert gets a lot of criticism for the way he handled himself, and yes, he did handle himself poorly, but what I'm saying is if it had not happened and the commissioner hadn't acted as swiftly as he did, I don't know what would have followed, because the next day at halftime of the St. John's game at the Garden, that was Thursday the 12th, the Big East canceled their tournament. They were one of the last to do so. Most of the other tournaments had canceled already, and I wrote in my book on March 12th, no sports in world. That's what's in my notes. I was live at 5 o'clock at the Flash Cam, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock sports, 11 o'clock. I mean, the whole world was coming down in terms of the sports world, and it was absolutely crazy.
Definitely. Just unbelievable. And I like what you said also about Adam Silver's actions and just how that one event, very fortunate that only a couple people in the Jazz organization contracted coronavirus and they all since recovered, but that one moment and the action taken by the NBA maybe set forward a precedent that a lot of these sports leagues followed and ultimately could have helped benefit a lot of people.
I really think so. I think Adam's leadership and his swift decision-making impacted the other sports to follow suit. And the Gobert thing will be talked about for years to come. And in terms of his irresponsible nature prior to the whole, the fact that he got the coronavirus, and that we can debate how that was handled, but I'm just saying that if it had not happened, it wouldn't have forced the commissioner to act as quickly as he did and the other leagues to follow suit. So, in a way, it was a blessing, because it could have saved many thousands, tens of thousands of lives in our country, just because we started to at least begin the shutdown, the lockdown, the stay at home, the social distancing, the things that needed to come in place. I just don't think people grasped how serious this pandemic was.
Definitely. And obviously now sports are at a halt, but we have heard about different sports leagues and athletes trying to help the community in the wake of this situation. I mean, we've heard so much about different athletes, Drew Brees in Louisiana helping out, DJ Augustine. We've heard about things locally, different teams and their executives and their players taking pay cuts to account for other personnel on the team. I mean, it's really great to see all this teamwork that we're seeing taking place throughout the sports world during this time.
And I've seen it firsthand from Daniel Jones, from Saquon Barkley, from Pete Alonso. Justin Verlander and Kate Upton donated masks to Covenant House in New York, which is a shelter for homeless youth and runaway youth. And Robert Kraft donating 300,000 masks and having them sent by his Patriots truck to the Javits Center. We've seen effort by the Wilf brothers and the whole Wilf family, from the owners of the Vikings, who are Jersey and New York natives, and they've committed $5 million during this pandemic. We've seen the Giants, the Jets, the Yankees, the Mets, the Knicks, the Rangers, the Devils, the Islanders. You know, all of our teams step up during this crisis. You know, the Jets and Giants, have been very much out front, and the Yankees and Mets also, and all the other teams. So I've seen a tremendous leadership. I've seen tremendous empathy. This reminds me in many ways to what we saw after 9/11, the way that the teams and sports kind of rallied around our nation. And unfortunately, back after 9/11, it was the start of sports, which helped give our nation a lift during its darkest time. And now this is a new darkest time, perhaps the darkest time we've ever seen, and sports can't provide the same vehicle in terms of jump-starting our country because they're down as well. So kind of in the same position as all Americans, waiting to see when we can start to emerge from this so-called stay-at-home order.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, like we've both said, this is something that we've never really seen before. You mentioned during 9/11 how sports were really what helped rejuvenate and bring people together, but right now they can't really do that either, except I do want to talk about the NFL draft because they made some adjustments. They did a virtual version of the NFL draft, Roger Goodell calling the picks from his basement and different teams working from at home. So talk about your coverage. What was that like covering an NFL draft here in a completely different way?
Well, first of all, the NFL has benefited from the fact that their season fit into a window here where it had not started yet, and it has the best opportunity, perhaps, to start on time and not lose any of its games if it's played out properly. I think that the NFL did a brilliant job on the draft. Even Goodell talking about the fact that, come on, boo me now, guys. You all boo, let's go. And the NFL draft was a big sporting event. Like you said, we haven't had sporting events. We've had the NFL draft, and now we've had the NFL schedule release. Well, that's like big news. Those are specials. Those are 3-hour shows because it gave us something and gives us something to talk about. And I thought the NFL draft was fantastic. I mean, I was on Zoom calls instead of being live at the draft where I normally am, interviewing the athletes at Giants and Jets Select. I went to Zoom calls to try to interview some of these guys with the other writers and broadcasters. So we got responses, but there's no real interaction that you would have the way you're next to somebody. So that was different. The fact that I'm in my basement following it on TV versus being live in Dallas or live at Radio City, it was quite different in that regard. So we all have to adapt. It was a virtual draft. The fans aren't involved. The fans are usually a huge part of it. They were involved from locations where they were on videos and they were on Zoom and they were participating in a different way. Also, the communication between the teams and among the team members was highly unusual and highly different, with everybody being secured in their own location and having to communicate by computer or by phone. So it was bizarre, but the NFL pulled it off. They had some problems in the run-through earlier in the week, but when they got to draft night, it was an absolute success. The ratings were off the charts, and it just goes to show that when you pull your resources together and people love football is crazy in America. People will watch it regardless, Eddie.
Yeah, and you mentioned just the need to adapt and how the NFL was successful with adapting. So I gotta ask you at this point, obviously we do not know when sports will be coming back to the field and to the courts, but do you think there are going to be any permanent changes that we're going to see in the sports world going forwards once we get back to action coming off of this coronavirus pandemic?
Absolutely. I mean, right off the bat, I don't expect to be in locker rooms. I expect the athletes to go to the podium when they have had a great game, or managers to just consistently be at a podium situation. I expect athletes after games to go through an area similar to what we do at the Olympics called a mix zone, where there's a little fence and you reach your microphones over, and therefore you're not as close to the athlete, and they walk through this little corridor, so to speak, with each of the reporters set up on the different side of the fence, so there won't be that same access that you had before. I think locker rooms will be closed for a while, and until we see a formal vaccine, it's going to change the way we cover sports in a big way.
Definitely. So the last thing I have to ask you, you have spent a long career here in New York sports. Could you give me your top 3 New York sports moments that you've had the opportunity to cover?
Top 3? That's almost impossible. I mean, the Giants winning Super Bowl 42 with David Tyree catching the ball in his head, I guess I'd have to start there. The New York Rangers winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in 54 years, 1994, my last year at Madison Square Garden Network. I was the reporter for the Rangers. I did the parade. I would say that had to be a big moment. Derek Jeter's 3,000th hit. He was 5 for 5 and hit a home run for number 3,000. I flew all night from California. I was in Newport Coast, California. My wife knew if he got close, I'd have to leave. He hit 2,998. I left her. She had to go home herself the next day. We had a dinner at like 5:30 at night. I drove from Newport Coast to LAX, took a red-eye, landed in New York, went home, showered, changed, went to the ballpark. She was upset with me. I knew I felt terrible, but once I called her and told her Jeter did it on his second at bat with a home run, she and my sons and everybody just thought it was so amazing that I got over it. They got over it, and then he proceeded to go 5 for 5 in the game. I would say that's got to be up there. Michael Phelps winning his 8th gold medal in Beijing. That was a big story. 8 gold medals in the Olympics in 2008. Usain Bolt in Rio in 2016 when he won his 3rd consecutive 100-meter dash at the Olympics. He's 9 for 9 in his career in the Olympic Games in the events that he's participated in. I waited for him for an interview. I was in the stadium. It's my favorite event in all of sports, the 100 meters, the world's fastest man. I got the interview with him. I got him to give me the bolt on the air. I would have to throw that in there as well. I mean, Mariano Rivera being taken out by Jeter and Pettit in his last game with tears flowing down at Yankee Stadium. I got to think that's got to be one of the moments. And I think Super Bowl 46 when the Giants won, that has to be a moment. Believe it or not, covering Wellington Mara's funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral was one of the most emotional events I've ever covered. He was the patriarch of his family. He was one of the pillars of the NFL, and to see the respect and Shockey and Strahan crying on the steps of St. Pat's, that impacted me, believe it or not, in a way that many of these other events did as well. And I know I'm leaving stuff out, but during my era of covering sports, those are the events I think that jump out. There's many more moments. There's other high points. There's Yankees winning World Series. I think when I saw Mark McGwire break the record of Roger Maris, I was in St. Louis. That was a big thing too. It was a big moment. We didn't know about the steroids and things like that at the time. So that was an incredible moment to cover. And also at Fenway Park, the home run derby with McGwire and Sosa, and covering that was just an electric moment in all of sports. So I've given you a lot. I guess I've been blessed to cover the New York sports scene for let's see, 1982, so 38 years. And it afforded me the opportunity to cover so many, and somebody's going to call up and say, oh, you forgot this, or you forgot that. Those are the ones, I guess, that just, jump out at me when I think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've had so many opportunities to cover so many great events, and now, in the wake of this pandemic, we hope soon that we can get back to sports and we can see even more of these great moments in New York and across the country very soon.
I think we will. I think we will get to the other side of the mountain, Eddie. I really do. I just think it's going to take time. Obviously, there's all this talk about testing, which is one of the ways that we will get back to playing. Not only, forget about the fans for a moment, but for baseball to come back, there needs to be a sophisticated testing procedure that's implemented, and for the other sports as well. And that's what the commissioners have to figure out here. That's what the leagues have to figure out. How do we promote safety and health, and at the same time allow the games to go on? It's quite puzzling. It's quite complicated. I think it can be done. I think fans in the scenario where the Dolphins are talking about 15,000 in a 65,000 seat stadium where they're all wearing masks and they're social distancing, that might be a first step for bringing fans back. But once we get a vaccine, I think we've got a chance for a return to normalcy, and that might take some time, but I'm still an optimist and believe it will be done by the end of the year. I truly think that will happen, and I think we all have to just hunker down, and we have to believe in the process, and we have to just, take care of each other and trust that we will return, and the strength of our people, the American people, I think the resilience that we show will come to the fore, and we will get through this. As Lou Carnesecca said, I said to him the other day, Lou, there's light at the end of the tunnel. He goes, I just hope it's not a damn flashlight. You know what I mean?
Hope, optimism, two really important ideas during this time. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. Glad that you're doing well, and hope everything gets better here with sports, and hope everything stays well with you.
Thanks, Ed. You're off to a great start in your career. I admire the work that you do. Your performance at the Little League World Series was just outstanding. It's been an honor to be working with you at our sports broadcasting camp over the years. So keep up the diligence, keep up the preparation, the homework. Your presentation is terrific, and I'm a big fan of yours as well.
Well, thank you very much. For Bruce and for Sarah Terracina, I'm Eddie Kalegi. We will see you next time here on the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS.